My beloved child, don't scroll away. This message found you for a reason, and what you're about to hear may completely change the way you see the person who has been on your heart. Before you dismiss this as coincidence, listen carefully. Last night was unlike any other night. While the world around them appeared quiet, your soulmate was living through a moment they never expected. A moment so emotional, so unexpected, that they woke up this morning with only one thought repeating over and over again: I have to tell them everything. Stay with me until the very end, because every part of this story leads to a truth that could change everything. For weeks, perhaps even months, your soulmate tried to convince themselves they were doing the right thing by keeping their emotions hidden. They smiled when people expected them to smile. They carried on with their daily routine as though nothing was missing. They answered questions with polite words while quietly avoiding the one conversation their heart desperately wanted to have. To everyone else, they seemed perfectly fine. But deep inside, they were carrying a silence that grew heavier with every passing day. Then last night happened. It didn't begin as anything extraordinary. It felt like any other evening. The sky slowly darkened, the noise of the day faded, and your soulmate believed it would simply become another ordinary night. They had no idea that before the sun rose again, something would happen that would shake them to their very core. Listen carefully because this part matters. At some point during the night, something unexpected forced them to stop running from their feelings. It wasn't a dramatic argument. It wasn't a magical coincidence. It was something much quieter, yet infinitely more powerful. In a single moment, they realized they had spent far too much time pretending they didn't care when, in reality, their heart had never stopped reaching for you. The truth arrived without warning. A simple memory returned. A familiar song began to play. A forgotten photograph caught their attention. A conversation reminded them of someone they could never replace. And suddenly, every emotional wall they had spent so long building started to fall apart. For the first time in a long while, they allowed themselves to stop pretending. They admitted something they had been denying for far too long. They still loved the connection they shared with you. Not because everything had been perfect. Not because there had never been mistakes. But because no matter how far they tried to walk away, no one else ever made them feel what you made them feel. Don't skip this next part. As the night grew quieter, they found themselves sitting alone with nothing except their thoughts. There were no distractions left. No busy schedules. No conversations to hide behind. Just complete silence. And in that silence, your name returned again and again. Every unanswered question came rushing back. Every memory they thought had faded suddenly became crystal clear. It felt as though their own heart refused to let them escape the truth any longer. They began replaying moments that once seemed ordinary but now meant everything. The way you listened without judging them. The way you believed in them during moments when they couldn't believe in themselves. The kindness you offered without asking for anything in return. They realized those moments had quietly become the standard by which they measured everyone else, yet no one had ever compared. What surprised them most wasn't the memories themselves. It was how alive those memories still felt. Time had passed. Life had changed. Both of you had grown. Yet somehow the emotional connection remained untouched beneath everything else. My beloved child, there is something else you need to know. Last night your soulmate asked themselves a question they had been avoiding for far too long. What if the greatest mistake I ever made wasn't loving them, but believing I had more time? That question refused to leave their mind. They walked from room to room searching for peace, but every answer pointed in the same direction. They could continue pretending nothing mattered, or they could finally tell you the truth they had carried in silence for so long. For the first time, they stopped worrying about pride. They stopped worrying about appearing strong. They stopped worrying about who should speak first. Instead, they began wondering how different life might become if honesty finally replaced fear. Something inside them shifted forever. The version of themselves that kept running was slowly disappearing. In its place stood someone ready to face uncomfortable truths, admit painful mistakes, and fight for something real instead of settling for endless uncertainty. Stay until the very end, because what happened during the final moments of last night didn't just change your soulmate's heart. It became the reason they are now desperate to tell you everything, and the next chapter reveals the unbelievable moment that convinced them they cannot stay silent any longer. The unbelievable moment came during the final hours of the night, when everything around your soulmate had become completely still. The outside world was asleep, yet their mind refused to rest. Every attempt to close their eyes only brought another memory of you. Every effort to silence their thoughts only made your presence feel stronger. It was as though their heart had finally decided that running away was no longer an option. My beloved child, listen carefully, because this part changes everything. As they sat alone, they found themselves reading through old messages they had promised never to open again. At first, they only wanted to remind themselves how much time had passed. But something unexpected happened. Instead of seeing old conversations, they saw pieces of a love they had never truly appreciated while it was still in front of them. Every kind word. Every shared dream. Every moment of encouragement suddenly carried a meaning far greater than before. They realized something that completely caught them off guard. During all this time, they had blamed circumstances, distance, and timing for everything that went wrong. But last night, for the first time, they looked honestly at themselves. They recognized the moments when fear spoke louder than love. They remembered the opportunities they allowed to slip away simply because they believed there would always be another chance. That truth was difficult to accept. Yet instead of breaking them, it awakened them. Don't skip this next part. For several minutes, they simply sat in silence. No music. No television. No distractions. Only the sound of their own heartbeat reminding them that some feelings cannot be ignored forever. It was in that quiet moment that one sentence entered their mind so clearly it almost felt spoken aloud. If I remain silent one more day, I may lose them forever. Those words echoed through every part of their heart. They stood up, walked across the room, and looked out into the darkness beyond the window. The night felt strangely peaceful, but inside them a storm was unfolding. They weren't afraid of loving you anymore. They were afraid of living the rest of their life wondering what might have happened if they had simply been brave enough to tell you the truth. At that very moment, something changed inside them forever. The person who had spent so long protecting themselves from disappointment suddenly understood that avoiding pain had also prevented them from experiencing the happiness they truly wanted. Every emotional wall they had built now felt like a prison rather than protection. Listen carefully. They began imagining what they would say if they had just one opportunity to speak openly with you. Not rehearsed words. Not perfect sentences. Just complete honesty. I miss the peace I felt with you. I miss the way you understood me without needing long explanations. I miss knowing there was someone who truly cared. Those simple thoughts became impossible to ignore. As dawn slowly approached, your soulmate realized that love is not proven through silent feelings hidden inside the heart. Love grows stronger when truth is finally given a voice. They understood that no amount of waiting could create the perfect moment. The perfect moment would only exist when they found the courage to be genuine. Meanwhile, something equally important has been happening within you. Life has been teaching you lessons about patience, self-worth, and resilience. Every challenge has quietly shaped your heart into someone stronger than before. Even during moments when nothing seemed to be happening, unseen growth was taking place beneath the surface. Sometimes destiny allows two people to grow separately so they can one day meet again as better versions of themselves. Not to repeat the past, but to create a future built on wisdom instead of fear. Your soulmate now sees that clearly. They no longer dream about changing yesterday. They dream about changing tomorrow. And for the first time in a very long while, hope feels stronger than regret. Stay until the very end, because the next chapter reveals the secret your soulmate has never shared with anyone, a truth about last night that explains why they woke up believing they could no longer hide their feelings from you, no matter what happens next. The truth they have never shared with anyone has been locked inside their heart for far too long. Last night was not simply another evening that came and went. It became the night they finally stopped arguing with their own feelings. Every excuse they had repeated for months suddenly lost its power. Every reason they believed they should stay silent faded into the background until only one truth remained. No matter how much time had passed, their heart still found its way back to you. My beloved child, don't skip this part because the next few moments reveal what truly happened. As the night grew deeper, your soulmate found themselves sitting in complete silence. They weren't searching for answers anymore. They were searching for peace. Yet every attempt to calm their thoughts brought another memory to the surface. They remembered the first time you made them laugh when they didn't think they could smile. They remembered the conversations that lasted far longer than either of you realized. They remembered the dreams you once shared and the promises that were never fully spoken aloud. Those memories didn't feel distant. They felt alive. Almost as though they had happened only yesterday. For a long time, they believed they had buried those emotions beneath work, responsibilities, and the distractions of everyday life. But last night proved something different. Real feelings do not disappear simply because they are ignored. They wait patiently beneath the surface until the heart is finally ready to acknowledge them. Listen carefully. There came a moment when they quietly whispered your name to themselves. No one else was there to hear it. No one would ever know it happened. But in that single moment, they realized something that completely changed the direction of their thoughts. Speaking your name no longer brought sadness alone. It brought hope. It reminded them that some connections remain meaningful regardless of how much time has passed. That frightened them. Not because they regretted loving you. Because they realized they had spent so much energy pretending they didn't. Don't skip this next part. Your soulmate began asking themselves questions they had avoided for far too long. What if fear had been making every important decision? What if pride had stolen opportunities that love was trying to create? What if the silence between you had lasted only because both hearts were waiting for someone to be brave first? Those questions refused to leave. Every answer pointed back to the same conclusion. Life had given them countless reasons to protect themselves, but it had also shown them that protecting the heart too much can prevent it from experiencing the very happiness it longs for. As the first light of morning slowly appeared beyond the horizon, they made a quiet promise to themselves. They would stop allowing yesterday's mistakes to control tomorrow's possibilities. They would stop assuming they already knew how your story would end. Instead of expecting rejection before speaking, they would choose honesty and allow the future to unfold naturally. Meanwhile, something inside you has also been changing. You may not recognize it yet, but every challenge you have faced has been strengthening your spirit. The disappointments that once seemed unbearable have slowly become lessons. The waiting has taught patience. The uncertainty has taught resilience. Without realizing it, you have become someone capable of receiving love with greater wisdom than ever before. Your soulmate senses that change even from a distance. They feel that the person you are today is not the same person they once knew. They believe you have grown stronger, calmer, and more confident. Rather than frightening them, that thought inspires them. It reminds them that people can heal, hearts can mature, and stories that once seemed broken can still find beautiful new chapters. There is one final truth about last night they cannot ignore. Before falling asleep, they looked toward the sky and made a silent wish. They didn't ask for wealth. They didn't ask for success. They didn't ask for an easier life. They simply hoped that if the opportunity ever appeared again, they would have the courage not to waste it. That quiet promise stayed with them when morning arrived. It followed them through every thought. It echoed through every heartbeat. And now it has become impossible to ignore. Your soulmate knows that keeping everything hidden is no longer protecting either of you. The silence has lasted long enough. The waiting has lasted long enough. The questions have lasted long enough. Deep inside, they understand that one honest conversation has the power to accomplish what months of silence never could. Stay with me until the very end, because the next chapter reveals the unexpected event that happens later that same day. An event so surprising that your soulmate takes it as the final sign that they can no longer wait another moment before trying to reach your heart. The unexpected event unfolded later that same day, and your soulmate still cannot explain why it affected them so deeply. They had promised themselves they would focus on everything except the feelings that had kept them awake the night before. They buried themselves in responsibilities, surrounded themselves with familiar faces, and tried to convince their mind that the emotional storm had finally passed. But no matter where they went, one thought quietly followed them. It wasn't loud. It wasn't demanding. It simply refused to leave. That thought was you. My beloved child, listen carefully because this is where the story takes another unexpected turn. While going about what seemed like an ordinary day, your soulmate experienced several small moments that felt strangely connected. None of them seemed important on their own, yet together they formed a pattern they could no longer ignore. A familiar place brought back a forgotten memory. A conversation unexpectedly reminded them of something you once said. Even the smallest details carried an emotional weight that felt impossible to dismiss. It was as though life itself kept placing gentle reminders in front of them, asking the same question over and over again. How much longer will you remain silent? That question settled deeply within their heart. For the first time, they stopped searching for reasons not to reach out. Instead, they began searching for reasons why they should. The list grew longer with every passing minute. They remembered how accepted they felt around you. They remembered the peace that surrounded your conversations. They remembered the encouragement you offered during moments when they doubted themselves. Those memories no longer felt like painful reminders of what had been lost. They felt like invitations to build something stronger in the future. Don't skip this next part. As the afternoon slowly passed, they realized something they had never admitted before. They had spent so much time fearing rejection that they never considered another possibility. What if honesty brought healing? What if speaking from the heart created understanding instead of distance? What if the future still held a chapter that neither of you had imagined because both of you were waiting for courage to arrive? Those questions changed everything. Instead of imagining the worst, they allowed themselves to imagine hope. Not perfect hope. Not unrealistic dreams. Just the simple possibility that people can grow, that hearts can forgive, and that meaningful conversations can begin even after long seasons of silence. Your soulmate noticed another change within themselves. The anxiety that once stopped them from taking action had begun giving way to determination. Fear still whispered, but it no longer controlled every decision. The voice of truth had become stronger. It reminded them that genuine feelings deserve honesty, even when the outcome cannot be guaranteed. Listen carefully. They began planning what they wanted to say. Not to impress you. Not to convince you of anything. They simply wanted their words to reflect the person they had become. They wanted you to know they had learned from the past. They wanted you to know they no longer blamed circumstances for every mistake. Most importantly, they wanted you to know that your kindness had never been forgotten. Every sentence they imagined carried the same message beneath the surface. Thank you for being part of my journey. I understand things differently now. I finally have the courage to tell you what my heart has been hiding. As evening approached once again, they looked back on everything that had happened since the previous night. They realized that the greatest change had not taken place around them. It had taken place within them. The person who once believed silence was safer had discovered that truth brings a peace silence never can. They no longer wanted to live inside endless, what-if, questions. They wanted to step forward with honesty, whatever the future might hold. Meanwhile, your own story has been unfolding in ways you may not fully recognize yet. Every challenge has been quietly preparing you for greater emotional wisdom. Every disappointment has taught you the importance of sincerity. Every season of waiting has strengthened your ability to recognize authentic love when it appears. Growth has been taking place on both sides of this connection, even when neither of you could see it. Now both journeys are slowly moving toward the same point. Not because life suddenly became perfect. Not because every obstacle disappeared. But because two hearts have been learning the same lesson from different directions. That fear cannot build the future, but honesty can. As the sun began to set, your soulmate took one final look at the unfinished message they had saved. This time they didn't delete it. They didn't close the screen. They simply smiled, took a slow breath, and quietly said to themselves, "Tomorrow, I stop hiding." That promise became more than a thought. It became a decision. And decisions born from truth have a remarkable way of changing the direction of a person's life. Stay until the very end, because the final chapter reveals what happens when your soulmate finally keeps that promise, and why the words they have been waiting to tell you leave both hearts forever transformed. The morning they had been preparing for finally arrived. It didn't feel dramatic. The sky looked the same. The world continued with its usual rhythm. People hurried through their routines without knowing that, somewhere, a heart was about to make one of the most important decisions of its life. Your soulmate woke up with a strange mixture of nervousness and peace. For the first time in a very long while, they weren't asking themselves whether they should tell you the truth. They had already made that decision. The only question left was when. My beloved child, stay with me because this chapter reveals the moment everything begins to move. They picked up their phones several times throughout the morning. Each time they unlocked the screen, your conversation appeared before them. They stared at your name for a long moment, smiled softly, and then placed the phone back down. Not because they had changed their mind, but because they wanted their words to come from complete honesty instead of emotion alone. They had waited this long. They wanted to make sure that when they finally spoke, every sentence reflected the person they had become. Listen carefully. As the hours passed, they found themselves remembering something you once told them. At the time, it seemed like an ordinary conversation. Today, those words carried a completely different meaning. You had said that the strongest people are not the ones who never make mistakes. They are the ones who are willing to admit them, learn from them, and become better because of them. Those words echoed through their heart again and again, and suddenly they realized you had been giving them the answer long before they were ready to hear it. That memory gave them courage. It reminded them that honesty is never wasted. Even if the outcome is uncertain, truth always brings peace. Don't skip this next part. Your soulmate opened the unfinished message once again. This time they didn't erase a single word. Instead, they added something they had never been brave enough to say. I don't expect you to forget the past. I only hope you'll allow me to be honest about what I've learned. After writing those words, they paused. Tears filled their eyes, not because they were sad, but because they finally felt free. They were no longer carrying the exhausting burden of pretending everything was fine. They were no longer hiding behind pride or fear. For the first time in a long time, they were simply being themselves. Meanwhile, something remarkable was happening inside you as well, even if you didn't recognize it yet. Your heart had become quieter than it once was. The confusion that had followed you for so long was slowly giving way to clarity. The need to force answers had begun to disappear. Instead, you had started trusting that the right conversations would arrive when both hearts were truly ready. Sometimes life delays a meeting, not to keep two people apart forever, but to prepare them for a healthier beginning than either of them could have created before. Your soulmate now understands that lesson. They realize that if they had spoken months ago, their words might have been driven by loneliness. Today, their words are guided by growth. That difference changes everything. They are no longer reaching out because they fear being alone. They are reaching out because they finally understand the value of genuine connection. Listen carefully because this is important. There is no anger left in their heart. No desire to prove they were right. No wish to reopen old arguments. Only gratitude. Gratitude for every lesson. Gratitude for every memory. Gratitude that your connection helped shape them into someone stronger, wiser, and more compassionate than they had ever been before. As the afternoon slowly faded into evening, they realized there would never be a perfect time. There would only be this moment. Waiting another week would not remove the fear. Waiting another month would not create more certainty. The only thing waiting would do was create more silence, and silence had already taken enough from both of you. With one slow breath, they looked at the message one final time. Their finger moved closer to the screen. Their heartbeat became louder than the room around them. Every memory from the past seemed to gather into that single moment. They whispered quietly, "Whatever happens next, I choose honesty." And just as they were about to send it, something completely unexpected appeared, something that felt so personal, so perfectly timed, that they could only see it as the final confirmation they had been waiting for. In that instant, every remaining doubt disappeared, and they knew beyond question that they could not turn back now. Stay until the very end, because the final chapter reveals the extraordinary sign your soulmate receives in that very moment, and the life-changing words they finally send to you that begin an unforgettable new chapter for both of your hearts. The extraordinary sign appeared so naturally that your soulmate almost missed it. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It didn't arrive with flashing lights or impossible events. It was one quiet moment that seemed ordinary to everyone else, yet to them it carried a meaning they could never ignore. As they stared at the message on their screen, wondering whether this would finally be the day they stopped hiding, an overwhelming feeling of peace settled over their heart. For the first time in a very long while, fear grew silent, and hope spoke louder than doubt. My beloved child, listen carefully because this is the moment your soulmate has been waiting for. They realized they were no longer asking themselves, "What if they don't answer?" Instead, a completely different question filled their heart. What if this conversation becomes the beginning of the life I've been hoping for? That single thought changed everything. For so long, every decision had been controlled by the possibility of failure. But now they were beginning to understand that love cannot grow where fear makes every choice. They finally accepted that even if the future remained uncertain, honesty would always leave them with peace. Silence never had. Don't skip this next part. With slow, careful hands, they opened the message one final time. Every sentence had been rewritten countless times over the past few days. Every word carried pieces of their heart. There were no dramatic promises. No attempts to impress you. Only simple truth. I've spent too long pretending I was okay. I've spent too long convincing myself these feelings would disappear. But they never did. I don't know what tomorrow holds, but I couldn't allow another day to pass without telling you how much this connection has meant to me. They read the words over and over again. Then something unexpected happened. Instead of feeling anxious, they felt relieved. It was as though years of emotional weight had finally begun lifting from their shoulders. They realized the greatest battle had never been between you and them. It had been between truth and fear inside their own heart. Listen carefully. As they prepared to send the message, memories from your journey together flowed through their mind one last time. They remembered the first conversation that made them smile without even trying. They remembered moments when both of you dreamed about a future that felt limitless. They remembered misunderstandings that created distance, but they also remembered the kindness that always seemed stronger than the pain. Those memories no longer filled them with regret. They filled them with gratitude. Because they finally understood that every chapter had shaped them into the person they were becoming today. Your soulmate quietly whispered words no one else will ever hear. If they choose a different path, I will respect it. If they need time, I will understand. But they deserve to know the truth. That quiet promise became their source of courage. Meanwhile, your own journey has been preparing you in ways you may not fully recognize. Every lesson you've learned has strengthened your heart. Every disappointment has shown you the value of sincerity. Every season of waiting has quietly built wisdom that only experience can bring. Neither of you is the same person you once were, and perhaps that is exactly why this moment matters so much. Sometimes two people must first become who they were meant to be before they are ready to truly understand each other. Your soulmate now believes that with all their heart. As evening settled once again, they took one deep breath. Their finger hovered over the screen for only a second before they smiled through nervous tears. Then they pressed send. The message disappeared from the screen. There was no taking it back. No deleting it. No hiding anymore. Only truth. Only courage. Only hope. In that single moment, they felt lighter than they had in years. Whatever happened next, they had finally chosen honesty over silence. They knew the future could not be controlled, but they also knew something even more important. Real love is never strengthened by pretending. It is strengthened by truth. As they placed the phone beside them, they quietly looked toward the evening sky and smiled. For the first time in what felt like forever, they stopped asking life to erase the past. Instead, they welcomed whatever tomorrow might bring with an open heart. And somewhere beyond the uncertainty, a brand new chapter quietly began. Stay with me until the very end, because the final conclusion reveals what happened after you received that message. And why the reply you sent became the answer your soulmate had been praying to hear for longer than they could ever admit. The reply did not arrive immediately. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Your soulmate looked at the screen more times than they could count. Every notification made their heart race. Every moment of silence tested the courage they had worked so hard to find. For just a moment, old fears tried to return. They whispered that perhaps they had waited too long. Perhaps the opportunity had already passed. But deep inside, something had changed. For the first time, they were no longer ashamed of telling the truth. They had finally spoken from the heart, and that alone brought a peace they had not felt in years. My beloved child, listen carefully, because this is the most important part of the entire story. As the evening became quiet once again, your phone lit up. You opened the message slowly. You read every word with care. There were no accusations. No attempts to rewrite history. No promises that everything would suddenly become perfect. There was only honesty. Only gratitude. Only a heart willing to admit its mistakes and hoping, not demanding, for one more chance to be heard. For a long moment, you simply sat in silence. You remembered everything. The beautiful memories. The difficult days. The laughter that came so naturally. The misunderstandings that slowly created distance. The dreams that once felt so close. Instead of allowing pain to speak first, you allowed wisdom to answer. You realized that people can change. Hearts can grow. Broken trust can sometimes be rebuilt through patience, respect, and consistent actions. So you took a deep breath and began writing your reply. Not because you had forgotten the past, but because you had learned from it. You thanked them for their honesty. You appreciated their courage. You admitted that life had changed you as well. You explained that healing had taken time, but it had also given you a clearer understanding of what truly matters. Then you wrote the words they never expected to read. I'm willing to have an honest conversation. Nothing more. Nothing less. But those simple words meant everything. When your soulmate read your reply, tears quietly filled their eyes. Not tears of sadness. Tears of relief. For the first time in a long while, hope no longer felt like a distant dream. It felt real. Days later, the two of you finally spoke. There were moments of silence. Moments of laughter. Moments when emotions became too strong for words. Neither of you tried to pretend the past had never happened. Instead, you chose to understand it. You listened. You apologized where apologies were needed. You forgave where forgiveness was possible. Most importantly, you recognized that lasting love is not built on flawless memories. It is built on honesty, kindness, patience, and the daily choice to respect one another. As time passed, your connection became stronger than it had ever been before. Not because life suddenly became easy, but because both of you had learned how to face challenges together instead of allowing them to pull you apart. You celebrated small victories. You supported each other through uncertain seasons. You laughed more than you worried. You spoke openly instead of hiding your feelings. And little by little, what once seemed like the end of your story became the beginning of its most meaningful chapter. My beloved child, if this story has touched your heart, let it remind you of one simple truth. Life gives us many opportunities, but the greatest ones often begin with a single honest conversation. Never let pride speak louder than kindness. Never let fear silence words that could bring healing. And never underestimate the power of sincerity, because even after long seasons of silence, truth has a remarkable way of leading hearts toward peace. May your journey always be guided by wisdom. May your heart remain open to growth. May your relationships be filled with respect, understanding, and genuine love. And may every ending that seems painful today become the foundation of a brighter tomorrow. Because the most beautiful love stories are not the ones without struggles. They are the ones where two people choose, again and again, to meet each other with honesty, compassion, and hope. And so, their story didn't end with a message. It began with one.